Good morning and welcome to Business Morning. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. Starting off from the global oil market as prices were mixed this morning, with Brent pulling back from an early gain on profit taking, while U.S. crude extended its rally amid signs that producers are cutting output as promised, just as demand picks up on a resumption of economic activities. Brent crude fell 19 cents to $34.62 a barrel after earlier touching its highest since April 9. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was up 11 cents at $31.93 a barrel, giving up some of its earlier gains. It rose as high as $33.44 earlier in the session, hitting its highest since March 16. The June WTI contract expires today, but there was little sign of a repeat of the historic plunge below zero seen a month ago on the eve of the May contract's expiry, amid signs that demand for crude and derived fuels is recovering from its nadir. The market was boosted earlier by signs that output cuts agreed by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and others, including Russia, a group known as OPEC Plus, are being implemented on the ground. OPEC Plus has cut its oil exports sharply in the first half of May. Companies that track shipments said, suggesting a strong start in complying with a new production cut agreement. Now, in further support for prices, U.S. production is also falling, with crude output from 7 major shale formations expected to fall by a record 197,000 barrels per day in June to 7.822 million barrels per day. That will be the lowest since August 2018, and that's according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Still, demand will recover only slowly as some restrictions remain in place, and there is a significant risk of repeat outbreaks and lockdowns. Meanwhile, OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Bakindo says the recovery can only be achieved with energy stability because market instability is a major threat to investments. During the Center on Global Energy Policy's Columbia Energy Club virtual roundtable, Mr. Bakindo explained that the industry needs the highest levels of cooperation and support from government to stabilize the energy market during the COVID-19 crisis. Okay, it's 2 months now since the central bank announced the 50 billion naira targeted credit facility for households and small and medium enterprises. There is also a 100 billion naira credit facility for the healthcare industry. Yet these businesses say they have not received a dime. The 50 billion naira fund is to be managed and disbursed by the Nassau Microfinance Bank, while the 100 billion naira is managed by the deposit money banks. Now, these come at 5% interest rate per annum for up to February 28, 2021, after which it reverses back to 9% per annum as from 1st of March 2021. So why this delay? Joining me now to respond to these questions and more are the Director, Development Finance Department of the Central Bank, Mr. Yusuf Yila, and the Managing Director, Nassau Microfinance Bank, Abubakar Kure, who joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Chimeze.
Well, Mr. Kure, let me start with you, Mr. Kure. Why the delay in the disbursement of this 50 billion naira to businesses that need them 2 months after the announcement was made? Mr. Kure.
Yeah, thank you. We are aware of the lockdown across the country from major cities. We have lockdown around Kano, Lagos, Port Harcourt, and incidentally Kaduna. So all those major cities constitute a significant part of the applicants who apply for COVID. And we are actually thinking outside the box to see how we can reach them so that they can come and have the loans. Currently, what we do is that we are using digitalization in form of emails. We send emails to them. Those who have email accounts will print the offer letters, send it back to us, do the documentation, and they're able to do that. But the most important thing is about the lockdown affected us, and that's why the credit facility was created. It also constitutes a challenge. So we are riding on technology and also improving our processes, systems, people, to be able to meet up with the expectation. We are fully aware that this law is for a short term. It's a short-term stimulus package by central bank intended to cushion effect on business and people. However, because of the lockdown, restriction of people, there have been delays. We also noticed there are delays around guarantors. People should come forward to guarantee people because they are viable businesses. The ones we have evaluated, they are actually successful SMEs and households who we feel they have capacity to pay back. But their system is being streamlined, reviewed, improved. Subsequently, when their lockdown have been lifted and our systems have been improved, we are likely to see a significant number of people enjoying the facility.
About the lockdown, talking about the lockdown being a major issue here, these funds were actually announced because of the impact that this lockdown is going to have on these businesses. Financial services, of course, is one of the essential services that were allowed to work during the lockdown. So I'm just wondering how and why the lockdown should actually delay the release of this fund.
Okay. You see, this is a loan, not a grant, because you're required to sign in offer letters in terms of documentation that you need to be signed, so that it requires physical interaction between the bank, that is National Microfinance, as well as the customer. So customers are unable to come to even sign documentation letters. Customers are unable to even get guarantors. But what we have done, because we try to enlighten customers, we have other e-channels of payment. We will have mobile application that has gone live for NMAB. We also have USSD that has gone live. So in spite of the restrictions, those who are able to book their documentation can do that. But the problem is that you're required to sign your offer letter. And that offer letter is a fundamental aspect of the loan. Also, you're required to have a guarantor. It's also a fundamental part of the loan. If it were just ordinary grants, we will have finished disbursement. Say, all you need is an account number, you now disburse the money. But of course, this is a loan, it requires stages. And unfortunately, as I've said, the lockdown has played a role. That's why the product was created in any case. But we have been creative now and innovative in terms of our systems. So hopefully, in spite of the lockdown, because we don't know what coronavirus will end, so we can't be waiting for coronavirus before we think outside the box. We have to come up with measures by way of improving our processes, our systems, our people, upscaling them to use remote ways of actually addressing this problem. So hopefully, as I've said, the numbers will grow, and in the next few weeks, we will see a lot of numbers growing by way of applicants who have enjoyed it. And already, if you go to our website, we have actually populated the successful applicant. It's not that the numbers are not there, but it is not there the way we have planned it. We also have a target, but we have not been able to achieve that target because of the lockdown. If you go to our website now, we have over 1,000 applicants that have enjoyed the facility. For the purpose of transparency and to make it real, because people have skepticism around whether this product is true or not, the fact of the matter is, as I'm speaking to you now, go to our website, you see the number of successful people who have received alerts. And the builder will come in a few days to come because, as I've said, the system is being upgraded to face these challenges.
Yeah, Mr. Kure, before I take you on these measures you're talking about, have you received these monies from the central bank?
Yes, so far I say about 5 billion for the central bank. Out of that 5 billion, we are disbursed a number, at least a material number, not very significant in terms of percentage, but at least up to 30% or thereabouts. But as I've said, the momentum will increase. On the 5 billion we received, we expect that in the next 2 weeks, we should be able to do up to 90% of that quantum. We received 5 billion for about 5,000 applicants. And as I'm speaking to you, we have done about 1,000 plus successfully, 1,000 plus applicants. The momentum will continue, hopefully, because of this review of process. Where is a short-term measure by central bank to stimulate the economy, because businesses have been harmed, people need to stay in job, households need to be equipped to mitigate the effect of COVID. However, we need to be more, we have been more creative. It's just that the system we have now, incidentally, we didn't anticipate it's going to be short-term, that can be able to cover short-term disbursements, because it's going to be, it needs to be immediate. So we are repackaging it to actually serve Nigerians better. So I just urge people to be patient. This is not, I must emphasize, this is not a grant, it's a loan. So it's not that it must cover everybody. There are evaluation processes. There is a credit score. So you have to fulfill the basic ones before you are successful.
All right.
It's not
all
everybody
right,
that apply that must get, because it's not a grant. So.
Yeah, Mr. Kure, just hold your thoughts there. Mr. Yila, let me come to you. Well, of course, part of Central Bank's responsibility as a stakeholder in this scheme is to provide the seed fund for the scheme and, of course, release funds to Nassau Microfinance Bank for disbursement. Well, Mr. Kure says the Central Bank has only released some of the monies. So how much of these monies have you released?
Okay, thank you, Chimezi. We've released so far 5 billion naira to the National Microfinance Bank for over 5,000 beneficiaries. And there's actually a process to the disbursement. While we're aware that about 297,000 applications have been received by the National Microfinance Bank, the timeline for disbursement within the central bank turnaround is 16 hours. So we received applications from the National Microfinance Bank for 5 billion, which we've disbursed to them for the 5,000 beneficiaries.
Now, what about the 100 billion naira meant for the healthcare sector? Why are the banks not giving out these monies yet?
Thank you, Chimezi. I think it would be uncharitable for you, so the banks are not giving out this money.
Well, I'm not the one that said it. I'm not the one that said it. I mean, we had someone here on the program who says they have not received any such money. They don't know about anybody who has received any such money.
Okay, so let me explain. For the 100 billion, as at today, we've received applications in excess of 62 billion naira. These funds are to be disbursed by the banks. When these applications come in, as a central bank, what we're actually looking at is how many jobs, take for example, a pharmaceutical company who is going to expand its line or it's going to build new capacity. How many jobs are going to be created? How many of the raw materials are going to be sourced locally? How much FX is the country going to be conserving? Those are things we actually look for in these applications. We're not going to be doling out money to people who are going to be importing or going to source for FX to import materials that we can source locally. I can also tell you that as of today, the central bank has disbursed excess of 11 billion naira out of the 100 billion. And this week, we're taking to Governor Emefiele another set of applications in excess of 20 billion naira from 9 banks. There's a process to it. Like I explained earlier, the idea is to conserve foreign exchange. And if you look at the pharmaceutical market, which you had somebody talk about yesterday, it's worth about $1.3 billion as we speak today. It will interest you to know that $900 million worth of pharma is imported into the country. And there's some capacity to be able to do that locally. So the central bank is indeed looking at those applications that will conserve foreign exchange and will ensure that materials are sourced locally. So disbursement has been done. One is for a pharma company who is looking to expand its line for intravenous foods and also to start additional antibiotic lines. So indeed, disbursements have been done.
Now, the guests I had on the show yesterday complained about the strenuous process that the banks put them through, as well as the kind of collateral they are asking from them. I thought this is supposed to be an emergency fund. I mean, I'm just trying to understand why put these beneficiaries through this strenuous process to gain this. This is supposed to be an emergency fund, you know, seeking to solve a particular problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a credit support intervention to the sector. And it's not a grant. It is a loan. And anytime a bank gives out a loan, there are certain conditions precedent that must be met. And I must tell you that certain things we've done, because of the lockdown, we receive applications by email. We work with the banks to carry out due diligence. Typically, things that take 3-4 weeks to do, we've cut them down to 2 days. We're in touch with the banks. The governor has had several meetings. I can tell you that technology has changed the way we work. We've met with NAFDAC, we've met with the pharmaceutical industry every single week. Yesterday, the governor was in the same meeting with manufacturers for about 3-4 hours. So, yes, whilst we're in an emergency situation, and yes, while there's lockdown, it has not stopped work. Speak to the banks. Typically, things, documentation that we used to validate 2-3 weeks, we've cut it down to about 2-3 days. I tell you that the biggest problem we're having is that most of the pharmaceutical companies or the hospitals that have submitted applications to access these funds have provided incomplete documentation. That is a source of worry because whilst we're in an emergency situation, due diligence must be followed. I told you this is a loan, it's not a grant. And the CBN has been favorably disposed. I'll give you something we've also done, if you read the guidelines. We're aware that hospitals, it takes a very long time to be able to recoup the investment. So the facility is for a long term, up to 10 years. One of the hospitals in one of our meetings complained about the cost of an MRI machine. A standard MRI machine costs you about $2 million. You can imagine how long it's going to take. But now that we've given the facility the first year for 5% at single-digit interest rate, and we've extended the tenure of the loan to 10 years, the terms are quite favorable for them to be able to access this facility.
All right, Mr. Akure, let me come to you. What kind of collateral are you requesting from these small businesses?
Yeah, SME collateral are actually different from large value ticket collateral. So they're actually soft collateral ranging from guarantor to movable assets in terms of other cars, household, or equipment. So centrally are things that ordinary SME can be able to meet. Deliberately, we didn't make it very tough, given our environment, given the fact that SME best practice to provide soft collateral. The most important we have looked at is cash flow. If you have cash flow ability to pay, that is what is important. It's not really about collateral. It's about your business experience, business cash flow, and ability to pay back. That's has been the fundamental measures we use. But collateral are basically soft. It's just to guarantee that, yes, Mr. A has capacity to pay back the loan. That's essentially. But they are really soft. They are not tough collaterals. Yeah.
All right. Now, don't forget that this 50 billion naira is not just for businesses. Households with verifiable evidence of livelihood adversely impacted by COVID-19 are also eligible for this fund. Are you also asking for collateral from these households? And are they meant to pay back, these monies? How does it work with the households, really?
I've earlier said that this is a loan, not a grant. Obviously, they have to pay back. Incidentally, household took the highest number in terms of applicants, not even the SME that I'm talking about. Household constitute about nearly 65% of the total volume of applicants. And the collateral, as I've said, there are two types. For the household, it's centrally just third-party guarantee or guarantor. If you have something to guarantee you that you pay back, fill a form, that's all you need. While for the SME, as it graduate, the amount graduate up, you also need movable assets, either in terms of cars, equipment, household, or what have you, or even animals. So these are basically, because the third-party guarantor is no service. Okay, the third-party guarantor is soft. It's in line with the concept of microloans. So it's not something difficult. But again, the truth of the matter is that part of the challenge we're having is that people are having difficulty in getting the guarantors. So you can see how it works. Perhaps because people think initially, or the concept is that it's a loan. Sorry, it's a grant, not a loan. And when you have that concept, of course, by the time you come to documentations, you have issues around having guarantor. That's part of what is slowing us down.
All right, Mr. Akure, just hold your thoughts. The gentlemen will get back to you. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with this conversation. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned. We're still talking about the COVID-19 Intervention Fund announced by the Central Bank sometime in March. And I still have Mr. Abubakar Kure, who is the Managing Director of Nassau Microfinance Bank, and of course, Mr. Yusuf Yila, who is the Director, Development Finance Department of the Central Bank, still there to talk to us. Well, let me start off with you, Mr. Yila. Now, interest rate under the intervention is about 5% per annum, and for businesses, this is actually mouth-watering, and of course, they would want to take advantage of it. However, this 5% expires on February 28th next year. If businesses have not accessed this fund till now, how much time do they have to reap the benefit?
Yeah, thank you, Chimeze. It's not just only the interest rates that we've brought down. And if you look at the policy response of the central bank, it goes much more than that. We've also granted an additional moratorium for 1 year for all intervention programs, over 26 of them in the portfolio of the central bank. So businesses can access this fund. It's a 100 billion fund. It's part of our short-term policy response. So until March the 1st, 2021, that window is available for any business that is eligible. And I also want to respond to the 50 billion targeted credit facility. The central bank is not just sitting down. We've looked at the data sets that the NMFB has generated. Earlier on, I told you about 300,000 people had applied for the loan. And what the governor has asked us to do is to look at how we can leverage technology more effectively. Yes, there's a lockdown. Yes, a lot of people cannot go to work, but people do need these funds. He's been concerned, especially households. Quite a number of people have lost their jobs. A lot of businesses are running out of cash. And you will see us respond this week. We've been working with the NMFB and a couple of other providers to see how we can utilize technology properly to, one, front load a lot of the activities. Kure talked about the need for a guarantor. So those who have guarantors, not after the loan has been approved, you'll say things like you front load a lot of the information that you have. And once the application is approved within 24 hours, your facility is disbursed to any bank, irrespective, apart from the NMFB, any bank of your choice. So you will see us respond later this week, working with the NMFB to achieve the targets that Governor Emefiele has set.
Can you tell us categorically, talking about later this week, are you saying categorically that by this week, some of these beneficiaries that are qualified to get these loans will begin to receive this money?
Absolutely. Any beneficiary that has fulfilled the conditions will get his credit before the end of the week, and I can assure you that.
Now, is it possible that this interest rate begins to count from the date the last person assesses this fund?
Absolutely. It's a credit from the day you approve, from the day you the facility is approved that you receive the money. That's when the interest rate starts to count.
All right, Mr. Kure, let me get back to you. You talked about some of the measures, thinking out of the box, some of the measures you're trying to put in place to ensure that you get this task done. So what are these measures that you've tried to put in place? Hello, Mr. Kure, can you hear me? Yes, you talked about some of the measures you have put in place to ensure that you have a seamless, process in ensuring that these monies get to the beneficiaries. What are these measures that you have tried to put in place so far? Now, Mr. Kure, I think we're having some kind of challenges there getting your audio. Mr. Yila, we had the Smeaton DG on the show yesterday who said that they are aware of the 50 billion naira intervention for the SMEs, but they were not carried along in the whole process. Why?
I'm sure there's some confusion around that. There are two intervention schemes that we have in the portfolio of the central bank. This one is a new one, the 50 billion targeted credit facility, which guidelines we released last month. I'm sure he is talking about the AXMIS, which is the Agriculture and Small and Medium Enterprise Intervention Scheme. which is the loan you can take up to 10 million naira uncollateralized, which is also being run by the National Microfinance Bank. SMEDAN is one of the entrepreneurship development institutes that we use. So you go there, you get trained for 3 weeks, and then you bring in the certificate, you upload it, it's automated into the portal, and you apply for the facility. It's split 70% equipment, 30% working capital. It's an uncollateralized facility. I am sure he's talking about the AXMIS. For the 50 billion targeted credit facility that was released by the CBN, it's just a facility, an emergency facility that targeted at small businesses, and the guidelines are simple. So SMEDAN, if they have SMEs under their portfolio, they can really guide them. And indeed, we said for those who are not technology savvy, because the application process is a bit automated, you have to apply on the portal. You can actually, those who have access to any SMEDAN facility can go there and apply. So I don't understand what he's saying in the first instance. He might have been talking about the AXMIS, of which they are EDI, but the 50 billion targeted credit facility is available for all stakeholders who want to access.
All right, let me get back to Mr. Kuria. Mr. Kuria, I was asking you about some of the things you have thought out of the box. You said you are thinking out of the box. What are these measures that you are coming up with to ensure a seamless process in this whole thing?
Basically, is to leverage on technology to ensure turnaround time for disbursement is higher. What we try to do is that before now, most of the activity takes place post-disbursement. But now we want to make sure all the activities ranging from credit risk checks, guarantor, credit register, as well as disposable movable assets.
Oh, well, the technology seems not to be friendly at this time. But let me see if Mr. Yila is there. Mr. Yila, how do you hope to work with the banks and, of course, NERSAL to minimize the rigorous process attached to assessing this fund to ensure that the aim of actually giving out these monies are well utilized?
Thank you, Chimeze. I earlier mentioned to you that Emefiele has set new targets on the disbursement of these funds, and we are working on a solution. Yesterday, we held a couple of meetings with a couple of service providers who have offered to help the National Microfinance Bank in leveraging better technology to be able to fast track and disburse these funds. Like I earlier mentioned, a lot of the activities that are post the application are going to be front-loaded now upfront. So you provide all those details such that after the application has been approved, we've set, Governor Emefiele has set timelines, 24 hours after the application has been approved. Essentially, what you should be receiving is an alert. Like I said earlier, he's always been worried about a lot of people who've lost their jobs, about the time it will take, because quite a number of SMEs, he's mentioned to me, are running out of cash, and that we really need to get these funds across to them. Whilst this is not a grant, this is a loan, we are in emergency mode, and we're working with the NMFP and other stakeholders to try and see how we can fast track that. And at the end of the week, you will see the new application process and the new timelines that have been set by the governor for the disbursement. On the healthcare side, we're also working with the big banks. 9 banks, like I said earlier, had put in applications worth around 62 billion. Most of them have documentation issues, but we're working with them to try and resolve it. Despite the lockdown, we've circulated a couple of emails that they can send these documents to. I mentioned earlier, key focus for us is how many jobs are this intervention going to bring, how much excess is foreign exchange is going to be conserved, and what is the impact on the economy. The governor has constantly said we need to keep an eye on the FX side and also on the jobs that will be created. 1.3 billion farmer market, 900 million imported is not good enough. We need to do more. If you look at the 60s and the 70s, you had a lot of pharmaceutical industries. And indeed, one of the pharmaceutical companies mentioned to us in several of the meetings that the governor hosted that a couple of foreigners who used to come into Nigeria, before they leave, they used to go around buying drugs because the drugs that we used to manufacture then were very effective, So he wants us to go back to those glory days. And we're keeping an eye on that and working with the banks to ensure that, indeed, once we disburse this money to the healthcare sector, that they're properly used and that the impact, and we reverse medical tourism that is happening quite frequently. Is an opportunity. We need to be able to turn this crisis into an opportunity. As it is, I'm not sure anybody can travel abroad for medical care. So this is the time to fix hospitals, to fix our advanced diagnostic centers, to fix the pharmaceutical industry. And I can tell you 3 times a week, the governor has been meeting with the pharmaceutical. We met with the NAFTA DG, with the pharmaceutical industry. Yesterday, we met with manufacturers. I have no Saturdays and Sundays. Technology has changed the way we work. So we're doing everything assiduously to ensure that, we disburse these funds and we make a change in the industry.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Yila. We're also keeping a tab on that money to see that it actually gets to the people it should get to. And we're taking you by your words. Before the end of this week, we should get reports that these beneficiaries have started receiving these monies. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for explaining this out. I have there Yusuf Yila, who is the Director, Development Finance Department of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and Abubakar Kure, who is the Managing Director, Nassau Microfinance Bank. Thank you, gentlemen. And for Monday's market review, here is Temple Ashaju. Temple, it was a positive start to the week, but will that be sustained?
Well, we do hope it will be sustainable because there's been quite a number of bargain hunting in the markets lately, and that is something that a lot of investors do believe will run through the end of this week because quite a number of the stocks that you have in the markets are really trading below their values, their regular value. The valuations are really low, and so that's something that investors will continue to check. So basically, we're up by some 29 basis points yesterday. We recorded some 37 billion naira in terms of addition to the equity capitalization of the market, and of course that's translated to some rise in the volume, some 40% rise in terms of the volume of transaction yesterday, which speaks to the activity level of the market, which is really positive yesterday at 331 million units. And of course, Access Bank was the most actively traded company. It was the volume booster and shocker for the session yesterday. It rose by some 2.4% yesterday, and some 80 plus million units of its shares was traded at over 523 million naira. That's over $500 million naira in the market yesterday. That's the contributions that it had to the activity level yesterday, as deals came in at 5,544. And we also know that Wema Bank, which is one of the banks and listed in the stock exchange, had its 75th AGM yesterday. Shareholders eventually approved the 4 kobo dividend payout, which is an 8% growth from what they paid last year. They did 3 kobo last year. That was the first dividend after some years that this particular company was paying. It was an AGM that held by proxy. We know that the gross earnings was really positive at 96 billion naira. They had a profit before tax of around 6.7 billion naira. That's some 40% growth of what they did the previous year. And if you look at the bottom line, the profit after tax, it was also at 5.6 billion naira, representing some 50-something% growth. Now, we understand that cash deposits was at 56%, and that contributed more to what they did last year only. And of course, Alat, which is now 3-year-old, as part of an initiative of this company, has now helped this company to record that. Of course, Okomu PLC also had its qualification days as yesterday, and that's what informed the about 10% growth that it had in price yesterday in terms of price appreciation. But basically, we have Mr. Rotimi Fakayejo joining us now. Mr. Rotimi Fakayejo is a stockbroker, of course, with the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Good morning, sir. Thank you for coming through on the program.
Good morning, Temple.
Yeah, so it's been more of bargain hunting lately in the market. Is that going to be sustained in the market for the rest of the week as we see valuations still low on some of the stocks that have very sound fundamentals?
Yes, just as you have said, a lot of the stocks still has an upside advantage. And I think that definitely is what is defining what we are seeing presently in the market. But I believe strongly that we will see the market better than what we did last week. And so the bargain hunt for stocks definitely will most likely for the week. And I think We have started the week at a 0.9% positive change for yesterday. There's every likelihood that we will have that continue for the rest of the week. Although it may not be every day, but I think by the next change for the week, by the time we are closing the week by Friday, it may definitely be positive.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that insight, Mr. Rotimi Fakare, just stockbroker with the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Of course, we know that tomorrow, Wednesday, the debt management office will be carrying out the 60 billion naira debt auction. That's something we do hope will not distract investors from investing in equity space. And that's it, Chimezie.
Thank you, Tempo. While the COVID-19 pandemic, no doubt, is the biggest challenge this generation has had to face across every sector of the economy, businesses, including financial institutions, have suffered major hits, especially for a year that started on a very great footing for a number of Nigerian banks. Now, as the economic fallout spreads, the financial sector, specifically banks, find themselves juggling priorities that require concrete steps to reposition now, while also recalibrating for the future. To manage the uncertainties and the reopening of the economy will surely require reinvention. This presents an opportunity and a need for many companies to build the competencies they wish they had invested in before, to be more digital, data-driven, and in the cloud, to have more variable cost structures, agile operations and automation, to create stronger capabilities in e-commerce and security. Now, this will be central to the long-term capabilities they build. How can the financial sector, particularly the banks, navigate through these difficult times and reposition for business after COVID-19? I'm being joined by the Chief Consultant, B. Adedipe Associates, Dr. Biodo Adedipe. Thank you very much, Dr. Adedipe, for joining us. Well, I'm so sorry you had to pass through that traffic we experience here all the time. Anyway, in your opinion, what are the business realities and trends of the financial and banking sector?
Well, thank you for having me here. I think the major issue where we start from is to recognize where banks stand in the contemporary modern economy. Now, the role they play, there are two fundamental roles, apart from other things banks do. One is what we call intermediation, which means they take deposits, and of course, they also grant loans. So for the modern economy to thrive, banks must consistently provide loans and all forms of credit to support the economy. That's on the one side. Now, it means then that if banks be able to do that, they must be able to sustain the confidence and trust of their customers. Now, the second thing they do, which is facilitating payments, also very important, because if you look at the contemporary modern economy, there is more specialization. So that means people do things, they produce things, offer services, and also earn money. But they have to make payments to those that have rendered such services to them. So now, for banks, therefore, that's why, in terms of regulation, banks are seen as significant public entities. So which means they are very central. So, but unfortunately, in a situation like this, banks are hit on both sides of what we describe as the demand and supply shocks that are caused by this pandemic, which means those that produce are unable to sell, those that want to buy are unable to access what they want to buy. Once that happens, the third major plank of economic activities, which is where banks are central, is exchange. That collapses immediately. So that means it puts banks in a challenge of, one, collecting loans they had granted on the one hand, and then on the other hand, people won't bring fresh deposits. And simply because what they have now, they are falling back on their surpluses and savings. So instead of bringing fresh deposits, banks don't get, and money, of course, is raw material in banking anyway.
All right, Dr. Adedipe, how do you envisage these realities and trends will actually impact the bottom line?
A very good question. Now, where I start from is the fact that loans that banks gave out, there are a number of those loans they won't be able to collect now, because those who took those loans don't have the capacity to meet the maturing obligations to those banks. So there's an expectation that non-performing loans will likely grow. And once that happens, it means banks will have to start making provisions according to the banking regulations and expectations. Once they do that also, it immediately impacts the bottom line. So number one is that you are not earning fresh income the way you projected when the year started. Secondly is that even the little you earn, for those who are still in business anyway, you find that you have to put, it's like somebody prepared food, and they told you, because of the problem outside there, you can't eat the food, go and put it in the freezer. That's what provisions represent for banks.
All right, Dr. Adil, just hold your thoughts there. We'll come back to this conversation. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this conversation. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we're talking about how the financial sector actually can navigate the human and business impact of COVID-19, and I still have here with me Dr. Biodo Adedipe. Dr. Adedipe, you were talking about the bottom line of these banks.
Yes, the one thing is that the volume of transactions would drop significantly on the one hand, and then pressure also comes in terms of pricing. Just like the central bank has given the banks forbearance to restructure loans that they have difficulty collecting. But what this means strategically is that if you're unable to collect the loans you have given, that also shrinks the space you have for creating new loans that ordinarily should bring fresh income to the bank. There's the other side of fees and commissions. So all the transactions that normally should bring fees and commissions also, a lot of them will again disappear in a period like this. So if you look at the entire spectrum of revenue for banks, banks will take a hit in every area. So there'll be significant revenue reduction. So no bank, I think, can escape that. That's the reality. And it's not just in Nigeria, it's a global phenomenon.
All right, we're talking about, we keep talking about challenges.
That's right.
Now, what are the opportunities of this pandemic for the sector operators?
Well, essentially, and this is something I've been talking about for quite a while, that banks need to revisit their business models and recognize that consumer behavior has changed. And also, all these issues about social distancing and the rest of it is making most businesses migrate to the internet platform. So in which case, every bank should see this as an opportunity to expand their foothold and footprint in the digital space. So it then means banks should be looking at this as an opportunity to build their digital platforms, strengthen that, and of course, look at the other side of cybersecurity. Because as it were, if you have to do more business on that platform, more of your customers have to migrate there, and you probably will also have to become think like a consultant. In which case, you are not just a regular banker, you now have to become like a consultant to your customers. So these are the things that will create new business opportunities. And of course, banks must ensure they put their names on the faces of their customers. This is a time to engage with them one by one, know what they are going through, and offer them advices on how to navigate the challenges.
Now, when the easing of the lockdown was initially announced, there was this fear that a lot of people were going to lose their jobs, particularly when this situation has really opened a lot of people's eyes that you can actually do a lot with the internet and all of that. And of course, some banks were even to be sacking their staffs before the central bank waded in to say, no, don't sack any staff. But do you see job losses eventually happening in this sector, or do you see creation of jobs?
Okay, now I will situate it in two contexts. The first context is to look at the history of humanity. How man migrated from Stone Age to the agrarian age to the industrial age, and then we talked about the, knowledge age and then information. So now what is happening is that as we move from one age to another, some skills will become irrelevant and some new skills will become desirable. What it means then is that for anybody who wants to retain his or her job in the environment we are seeing ourselves post-COVID-19, you need to have skills that will make you employable and relevant. So that on the one side means that globally, in any case, the projection globally is that about 200 million jobs will be lost as a result of COVID-19. That's the estimate by the International Labour Organization. So that's the global picture, okay? But the reality is that the banking industry is not, let me say it this way, they are not excluded from what is happening across all sectors. Okay, the reality of business is that when income is not coming the way you projected, you have to also look at the cost side. And of course, on the cost side for banks, they are looking at about 5 different items. First is you are looking at your personnel expenses, you are looking at your business expenses, premises expenses, then you have maintenance, okay? And then, of course, you talk about provisions, which has 2 legs for banks. The leg that applies to all businesses, which is amortization of your assets. Then the one that is peculiar to banks that I mentioned earlier, that is provision for loan losses. okay? So when you look at all those cost elements in your income statement, it means you have to ask yourself, what must we do with respect to personnel expenses, for example? Now, there are two matrices, as we say it, that throw up your personnel expenses, your money metrics and then your remuneration metrics. So whether you like it or not, sentiment apart, you have to look at either the number of people you have, which means it's a time to look at that number and realistically. Then the other side is to look at remuneration, what you pay them. So you play with those two. Now, I'm talking as a consultant, all right? You then go to business expenses and look at that also. What are those elements in your business expenses that you can do without? Now, if the situation we are in now, you have more people working from home, and that's the reality happening to every business around the world. You've discovered now that those who thought must report at work every day can actually deliver from home. So in which case, in redesigning their business models, those are areas banks will have to now look at in terms of how to become more cost efficient. That is the way we put it. They need to be efficient operationally, and they need to be efficient cost-wise. So it's not just about, oh, we want to reduce number of staff just for the sake of it. It comes out of proper dimensioning of the numbers.
So what quality of human assets should or can the banks retain or acquire?
Excellent. Now, I will put it in this way. If I were to analyze this for an institution, I will say that there are usually three categories of staff. There are those who refer to as your professional staff. There are those who refer to as support staff that do provide support for the professional staff, okay? And then you have the outsourced staff. Now, those are three categories. So the question to ask yourself is, the staff that are outsourced, that's where you start from. Now, do we really need those outsourced staff now when they cannot work from home? And many of our bank branches are still closed anyway until we are able to restructure them to fall in line with social distancing and other post-COVID-19 reopening guidelines issued by the NCDC and the government. So that is on the one side. Then you now look at the other side of it, come to think of it, even the support and professional staff. Professional staff, you can redesign their jobs. That's a major thing every company around the world should be doing. I call it job redesign. So if you redesign jobs, it means the focus will be on the deliverables. So what do we expect each of them to deliver? If I can work from home and still deliver what is expected of me, then it means my employer doesn't need to create a space for me to sit in the office because I don't need that space. So that is part of the job redesign. Now, if it then means the nature of my job, I can't work from home and yet I cannot be in the office, it means we have to redesign that job in such a way that that particular individual can still do something that contributes to value. In fact, there's a concept in business. We call it contribution. Contribution means what is every staff contributing to the bottom line? You're either contributing in terms of bringing income or you are contributing in terms of reducing cost. If any staff of any organization is not connected to any of those two aspects of the business, the institution or organization has no business keeping that person on the payroll. So that's why I thought about job redesign. So if I can reskill you or retrain you to be fit for the post-COVID-19 business model, then I must face the reality of business and say, look, I have to let go of this person. But I also balance that with the fact that if things eventually return to normal, I will need these particular skills. So the challenge facing the banks, I would say generally now, is how to strike that balance of recognizing those that are contributing to the bottom line on the one hand, and recognizing that there are some skills that we may still need in future. But certainly, sentiments apart. If we see what has happened in aviation globally, happened in tourism, in hospitality, in logistics, and the rest of them, no industry is, I would say, is immune to what is happening.
All right, Dr. Adedipe. Well, just before I let you go, a quick one. What's your outlook for the banking sector?
Well, I will go from this perspective that 2020 is a year to focus on survival, which means the strategies that banks should be coming up with for this particular year should be about survival. No doubt, anything like budget and prognosis that we had at the beginning of the year has disappeared. Nobody anywhere in the world, and we track what is happening globally, has given an indication that they expected this sort of pandemic to happen. So it was not in the plan of any organization around the world. So what that then means is that the budget they had at the beginning of the year has gone out of the window, just like our own federal government has done. Okay? So they have to look at that afresh. So it's about survivor. And when you get to survivor, you don't talk about niceties. You don't talk about sentiments. You face the reality of what needs to be done for us to survive. So if the banks will therefore grow, and that's the second leg of strategy. Strategy first is survive. The second is to grow. The third one is to now increase profit. So they can only talk about growing in 2021 and begin to talk about generating profit thereafter. So for this year, my sentiment for banks is that it is all about survivor.
Okay, survival strategy.
Yes.
That's where we will leave this conversation for now. Thank you very much, Dr. Adedipe.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Biodo Adedipe is the Chief Consultant, B. Adedipe Associates. And it's in that note that we draw the curtain on today's edition of the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu.